Welcome to chapter 24 of the book of 2Chronicles. We continue now with the kingdom of Joash, who was, it says, 7 years old in his taking reign after Athaliah was killed and put to death by Jehoiada, and his wife who protected Joash in their house for this period of time. And 40 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And the name of his mother was Zibiah, in the King James, from out of Beersheba, which is down in the southern part. So apparently she was Jewish, unlike Athaliah, who was, Athaliah was from Jezebel, from Sidon, probably Lebanese, blood in her. But this woman, Zibiah, apparently was the wife of Ahaziah, the king previous, Ahaziah. And Joash, did the upright thing before the Lord all the days of Jehoiada the Areos, the priest. Well, that sounds good that he did all the days of Jehoiada, but the problem is Jehoiada didn't live all the way through the kingdom. He died, I'm not exactly sure whereabouts in it, but maybe halfway. And the things that happened to Jehoiada's sons were by the hands of Joash are not pleasant to go into, but we will later in this chapter. And Jehoiada took two Ginecus, to himself, and engendered sons and daughters. So he lived, I think it was like 120. We'll find out a little bit later. So he had this large family. And it came to pass after these things that it came upon the heart of King Joash and there's no king, but to repair the house of the Lord. So everything is sounding pretty good. Now he is wanting to repair the house. The house at this time was probably over 200 years old. This is around 790 BC. And the house was, as we see, was weakened because of age and being plundered by Athaliah for the temple for Baal. And he gathered the priests and the Levites and said to them, "Well, go forth into the cities of Judah and gather from all Israel money to repair the house of your God until fit, year by year, and hasten to speak." And the Levites hastened not. Now, why did the Levites not do what they were told to do? Well, it's an instance of the lazy clergy, for maybe they didn't care about the house. They cared about themselves, and if you care about yourself, you don't care about the things of God, then you just do whatever pleases you, get whatever you want, spend your time however in pleasure and not with the Lord. And I'm sure there is a lot of clergy that has been drawn into this. A lot of times the clergy are clergy not because they necessarily were called by God. It may have been that they decided they wanted to be a priest or a minister or a pastor or whatever. I remember when I was back in my 20s, I wanted to become a Lutheran pastor, and the university I was going to, they had an open house at the seminary close by, and men that wanted to go into the ministry. And so I went down with about 3 or 4 other men and got our picture put on the Lutheran Witness magazine, the front page. And so I thought, well, that would be good to be a pastor. I could walk around with a little white collar, which they were wearing at that time, and people would be calling me Pastor so-and-so, and I can help all the people in their marriage problems and all this stuff. Wow, was I messed up. But I'm the last person to have been a pastor. I mean, today I still cringe at thinking ever having to have to be a pastor. It's a very difficult thing to be a pastor, and having people look at you and to try to do the right thing all the time, and mainly because of the people looking at you rather than God seeing you. But so this clergy these Levites were probably lazy. And the king called Jehoiada the ruler, and he said to him, "Why did you not require concerning the Levites, so as to carry in from Judah and Jerusalem the adjudged concerned by Moses, the man of God, for the assembly of Israel in the tent of the testimony?" This is what it was called for in the law, to support the tent and now to support the temple. And the king is chastising Jehoiada for these people not doing their job, and he's ahead of them. So why get your act together? Then he continues, king does, "For Athaliah was lawless, and her sons tore down the house of God, and also all the holy things of the house of the Lord they appointed to the Baals." So now we see the destruction that Athaliah caused in the years that she reigned, 7, 8, 9, 10, I'm not sure, 15, 10, 12 years. And they took a lot of the things from the house, and they built this house to Baal, which eventually was destroyed by Jehoiada and the rulers. And the king said, "Well, let there be a container, this glossokomon." The glossa is a tongue. So I'm having a funny feeling it's a container, but it would be some type of an open, the stoma is the mouth opening, so a glossa is a tongue, so maybe it was some type of a container that had some type of a protrusion on it so people could throw in and it would fall inside. "And let it be put at the gate of the house of the Lord outside." So when the people would go into the courtyard of the temple, we showed that earlier, then they, when they go in, then before it would be there at the gate. "And let them proclaim in Judah and in Jerusalem to carry into the Lord as Moses, the servant of God, said unto Israel in the wilderness." So Jehoiada goes and has this done. "And all the rulers were glad, and all the people, and they carried in and cast into the container until of which it was filled." So people now see this in front of them. And I guess they didn't pass around baskets in those days. They just had the container there, and you could put it in. Some churches I've been to, they don't take a collection, which kind of, to me, is, well, it doesn't really matter, I suppose. But I suppose if you're worried about how much you're giving and the basket comes and you'd only throw in $1 or something like that and everybody can see, then you look as a cheapskate. And so maybe that, I'm not exactly sure the pros and cons. So I suppose somebody could write a little booklet on the pros and cons of passing the basket versus having what they called here, the glossokomon. "And it came to pass in the time to bring in the glossokomon to the superintendents of the king by the hand of the Levites, that when they beheld that the money was superabundant, that the scribe of the king came, and the superintendent of the great priest, and they emptied out the container, and lifted and placed it upon its place," or back upon its place. "Thus they did day by day, and they gathered much money." So they emptied the container every day, poured it out. Superintendent, a couple people watching, making sure nobody's pilfering, and lots of money came in. And the king and Jehoiada the priest gave it to the ones doing the money, to the work of the house of the Lord. And they hired quarriers. Those are the people who do stonework. So there was a stonework being repaired and for the temple. And fabricators to repair the house of the Lord, wood, carpenters, and so forth. And braziers of iron, halkis, and sithiru, and of brass, halku, Chalcolithic era. It comes from this chalco, halku, the brass age, bronze age, and braziers of iron and of brass. And bronze was cast, so probably brass would be closer here, to strengthen the house of the Lord. So it was in bad shape, apparently, but now we have this money to fix it all up again the way it was originally, 200 years earlier or so. And the ones doing the works did so. And there ascended the length, and there ascended the length of the works by their hands. So everything was being built as they went down around the length of the temple. And they reestablished the house of the Lord in its position and strengthened it. So apparently the foundation was crumbling of some sort, so they were able to reestablish the house in its position, put stones underneath, and strengthening it with all these different methods that they had. And as they completed, they brought to the king and to Jehoiada the rest of the money. And they made with it items for the house of the Lord, items for the liturgica, liturgy, the ministry, and of the whole burnt offerings, holokaustomaton, Holocaust comes from that, and incense pans, and gold and silver vessels. And they offered, and you can add this to your English derivatives book, holokaustosis, of the whole burnt offerings, in the house of the Lord continually all the days of Jehoiada. So the temple and the ministry of the people sounds like it was doing very good all the days of Jehoiada. But now we find out the problems that arise. Jehoiada, the great priest, and Jehoiada grew old and was full of days, pleroma, plethora derivative. And he came to an end, being a son, 130 years, at his coming to an end. And they entombed him in the city of David with the kings, for he did goodness with Israel and with God and his house. Jehoiada was, to me, a hero of faith that belongs in the book of Hebrews, along with all the other heroes. He was instrumental in continuing the kingdom, did all good during his life. And he was buried with honor with the kings, and but not Joash, as we find out. In fact, Joash was even omitted from the genealogy of Christ. And it came to pass after the decease of Jehoiada, the rulers of Judah entered and did obeisance to the king, giving him we bow down to him as the greater authority. Then the king heeded them. So now we have a switch from the listening to the clergy to listening to the secularists, which were the rulers of Judah. So the king no longer listened to the Levites and the priests, apparently, but listened to these secularists. I look at the United States today, and it was founded on biblical principles, basically, and Christianity has been very strong in the United States for over 200 years, but now since 1960s, it's been whittling down to now it's a minority religion. And people are no longer listening to pastors, or not. Televangelists have ripped people off and act really weird, wear all kinds of strange clothes, just doing horrible things that have, if the devil wanted to do any harm in the United States, he would have put televangelists that wear all these pompadour haircuts and hair and wigs and all this rich wealth and all this opulence. All he would have to do is what he's done, what's happened in the United States, and people get sick of it, and they see the hypocrisy in it, don't want to have anything to do with it. So when you don't have anything to do with it, you don't have this clergy, the famous psychologist, Jung, I think was it Carl Jung? Jung, who was a protege of Sigmund Freud, they actually filmed him years ago, and basically he said that if you don't have God to seek, government is the next best thing, And this is what we have today. People do not have God, so they go to the government to solve all of their problems, and this is what happened here. And they abandoned the house of the Lord, the God of their fathers, and same as today was being abandoned in the United States, the churches and so forth, and served to the Ashtoreth and to the idols. People are doing the same thing today, turning churches into restaurants and so forth. And the inner cities everything is being torn down anyway, and nothing being built up to a disastrous place where I used to live in North St. Louis. And everything is just torn down to the ground. All the beautiful churches, everything just wiped out. Looks like the First World War battlefield. So these people served to the Ashtoreth in the King James, who was the goddess from Sidon, up further north in Lebanon, and to the idols, Elolis. So this is what they started serving now, going back to the idols, idolatry. Just as we are today, if we don't have God, then you serve something. Spend all your time in front of the television watching football or politics or soapbox operas and all sorts of things. You can spend your time, your idols. And there came orgy, and orgy is the derivative, anger, something all upsetting, a frenzy, against Judah and against Jerusalem in their trespass, as by God. And he sent to them prophets to turn them to the Lord, and they testified to them, and they hearkened not. Now, the writer of 2Chronicles, I'm not exactly sure when he wrote, and if he's talking about the prophets over a period of time, or it says to them, or specifically to the rulers at this time, I'm not really sure. And pneuma, pneumatics, is derivative of God, power of wind, air, and Spirit of God was put on Zachariah, the son of Eodiah, the priest. That was the priest that took Joash, the king here, and guarded him when he was for 7 years. And he rose up above the people. And he said to them, Thus says the Lord, why do you pass by the commandments of the Lord, that your way shall not prosper? If you pass by, and this is exactly here, if we are bypassing Christ and giving up on him, we will not prosper. This country will fall apart, and it is in front of me right now. I look and see the things that are falling apart, and it will eventually fall apart. Sad to say. For you abandon the Lord, and he shall abandon you. The United States is abandoning Jesus. He will abandon the United States. And they assailed against him, the rulers, and stoned him with stones by command of Joash, the king, who his father saved him. In the courtyard of the house of the Lord, they killed this prophet that was prophesying the destruction of the kingdom. And Joash the king remembered not the mercy of which Jehoiada his father performed with him. And he put his son to death. Well, that's sad. Really, really sad. It's hard. The difference all of a sudden with the death of this man, then all of a sudden these rulers come and the king changes. And it's amazing how fast it can happen. In this country, I'd see in the 60s, 10 years it was destroyed. Basically, you have feminism coming in. Now, I'm not against women having rights and equal rights, but then it came doing abortions to get rid of the unwanted children and go out and get jobs and go into the military, go to the front lines and get shot, all kinds of things that the feminists brought into the 60s, which began women quit wearing dresses, quit wearing feminine clothes, started cutting their hair short, started wearing pants. Men didn't wear, well, now they are. A lot of men now are becoming transvestites and wearing dresses and women's clothes and all that. It's really a terrible mess. So to me, it would be amazing if it wasn't destroyed. And people have thought it would have been destroyed a long time before this. And it came to pass at the completion of the year the force of Syria ascended against him and came against Judah and against Jerusalem. And they utterly destroyed all the rulers of the people from among the people, and all their spoils they sent to the king of Damascus. This would have been the third sacking of Jerusalem. And the force of Syria came with a few men, but God delivered up into their hands an exceedingly vast force, for they abandoned the Lord God of their fathers. So if we think that we have all this power, when God is doing the destruction, there's nobody that can stand against it. And this is exactly what God prophesied or warned of in the curses and the blessings on Mount Ebal and Gerizim, and that you would be chased by a few people, and instead of you chasing with a few people, a vast amount. And with Joash, they executed judgment. So now exactly what they did with Joash, if they hurt him physically, possibly beat him, I'm not sure. And after their going forth from him and abandoning him with great infirmity, so that's what makes me believe that he was harmed in some way, megalis, great, that his servants assailed against him. And a lot of this we can see other information in 2 Kings 13 and 14. So his servants assailed because of the blood of the sons of Jehoiada the priest. And they killed him upon his bed, and he died. So he was infirm, and they killed him because of his cruelty. And they entombed him in the city of David, but they did not entomb him in the tomb of the kings, where Jehoiada was entombed. So this man was not entombed there. He was buried somewhere else. And the ones assailing against him, Zavad, son of Samaath, the Ammonitidos, and Eozaved, son of Samarith, the Moabitidos, Moabites and Ammonites, and his sons, and the greatest concerns about him, and the groundwork of the house of God, what he did in the house of God, and the rest, behold, it is written upon the writing of the Vivliu, the scroll, graphene, a graph of the kings. And Amaziah, his son, reigned instead of him. The end of this evil king who turned evil at the second half, again leaving instead of waiting until the end with the Lord. Over and over, theme in the Bible that I see. Anybody that thinks that if you have said the sinner's prayer, it's a done deal, you're in heaven, beware. Next chapter, 25, we will continue in the next king, Amaziah. Hope you'll join us in chapter 25, and God bless.